I was gonna make another science vlog thing on climate change, but watching the reaction to the death of this dude, Castro, I thought it was pretty interesting the way people reacted from any side. Because there's a lot of people that hate him for not hard to understand reasons. You know, he's responsible for thousands of deaths, so as far as hating a politicians go, that's a pretty good reason. And people that like deify him because mainly, yeah, independence from American imperialism. People in like Latin countries, some African countries, who you know they view themselves as being under like just despite not being in the United States, they're under their control. And the Castro idea of taking power into your own hands, it's a lot of people seem to like that, mainly in those countries for sort of independence reasons, anti-colonialism, anti-imperialism kind of shit. Yeah, it's understandable, but the reaction amongst these people and that is kind of interesting, especially amongst the people that really hate this dude. They hate him because, well, he's responsible for the deaths of a lot of people. Pretty understandable, but when I was looking through like Twitter profiles of people that really hated him, I noticed that they supported like Assad, Putin, well, at least overtly, and predominantly like from the United States. These people like vicariously then supported much worse people than Putin and much worse than Castro. And I thought the thing that was pretty interesting because bam, this motherfucker. This is the dude who was in control of Cuba before Castro, and while there's some pretty good reasons to not like Castro, this guy is there's a lot more to hate this guy. And yeah, public executions, torture, wide scale. Because mainly the thing is among Cubans specifically. Like there were no many Cubans, pretty much I don't know, pretty much all of them, unless they were like being paid off by him or like in cahoots. Because this guy was like one corrupt ass motherfucker, killed a lot of people. Cubans did not like him, and that's what led way to Castro and the revolutionaries. They killed this motherfucker off, and then Castro's regime started. And from what I gather, Castro was responsible for like on the order of thousands of deaths, and it looks like most of those were early on, were like former people of this guy's regime. Many of which were like convicted of murder, torture, and they were just like put up by like firing squads and shit. And while most of them probably didn't even get anything close to a trial, not even a sham one, probably a decent amount of them were, you know, did commit the murders and shit they were accused of. But considering that Castro also has a pretty bad history with political dissidents in Cuba, it's still understandable to dislike him, even if the number of people he killed is still like I'm not sure how it compared to like people killed by drone strikes in the past 8 years. I'm not sure, but it's still a lot of people, innocent people too, dead because of this guy. And uh, what's interesting is that this Batista dude was supported by the United States, and he was fucking way worse. And I found that to be really interesting. It's probably another reason why a lot of the people that like Castro, who like in Cuba and shit, they really hated the United States because they were helping this motherfucker maintain control over them. And humansrightwatch.org. reading about all the people Castro is responsible for the deaths of, it seems to be on the order of thousands. Most of which were from like early, like 59, early 60s, who like were cahoots with Batista, and then like later on it was mainly people who were like it's hard to tell if it's just trumped up charges or if they're actually guilty. Like the most notorious one probably is Arnoldo Ochoa, who is probably as well with Castro's brothers involved in drug trafficking with what's his name, Pablo Escobar, Colombian dude who's also a pretty easy to hate motherfucker. But reading on Castro stuff, this like I'm not sure what to call it. Like the hatred for him, though, it goes back a long time between the people that hate him and love him. And what's interesting is that even though he's responsible for a lot of deaths, that the reasons, uh, the United States has tried to kill this motherfucker so many times. Like, I don't even know how he survived to, what, 90, I think? Yeah. Considering, like Bay of Pigs invasions, there was, like, United States assisted invasions of his country, or the country he was ruling. Assassination attempts, like, I don't know how he lived this fucking long. It honestly doesn't make sense to me that the U.S. failed to kill him after so many attempts. But particularly from I think like declassified documents from the Kennedy administration, they talked about like the threat of Castro wasn't his regime and like its human rights violations or anything like that. It was purely for like the Castro idea of having the people of Cuba take up revolutionary arms against regimes, take control over themselves. Where United States, they were trying to broaden their sphere of influence, and that's why they hated him. Not for like murder, but just for like trying to be anti-imperialist or whatever the fuck. And I find it interesting that at least the actual but perhaps unofficial reason the government hated him early on wasn't because of like the bad things he's done. It was because of the counter imperialism, I guess. I'm not sure what to call it. But anyway, yeah, it's almost like what the people who really really hate Castro probably also really really fucking hate Saddam Hussein. Again, Saddam Hussein. He's even worse than Castro in terms of just pure numbers. He's fucking killed a lot of people, or is responsible for their deaths at least. Unless they killed him by hand. It's like this number here is 250,000. That's the lowest estimate. Jeez. So it's like this guy is like Hussein. In retrospectively, not many people like this guy. At least not of the ones who really fucking hate Castro, at least even like Castro. But what I find interesting is that the United States, or at least the United States government, not necessarily the people, supported Hussein throughout some of his worst atrocities. Let's see here. Iran-Iraq War. Because while after the 90s, well, in the 90s, up until his death, the United States and Americans didn't like Hussein because he committed atrocities, human rights violations, shit like that. But during the 80s, they overtly supported him and supplied him with all kinds of support for the Iran war. Even though he was still doing all the, murder, mass murder, human rights violations, etc. The same reason people say they hate Castro was the reason the United States government says they hate Castro the same reason all these people fucking, at least the government and the government people, ones on Twitter talking about it now, they're some of the same people that would fucking help this dude slaughter a lot of people. Yeah, notorious ones. Chemical attack. One of the cities lost to an Iranian army. Kurdish guerrillas. They fucking had a, what was it? Mustard gas. Was it? Was mustard gas specifically, or okay? Napalm. Sweet apples. I know cut grass is phosgene. Not sure what sweet apples is. But yeah, okay, mustard gas and nerve agents. Like, what was it? 5,000 people. So this is in like, geez, so in like one day, like Castro's killed some people. And if you were to take all like the essentially the, even though they didn't have a trial, like the Bautista supporters who were like, you know, murderers, and the people that would have been, you know, convicted of the death penalty, since they had that then, I think, in Cuba. If you're like, with and without those, I'm pretty sure that in this single fucking day, Hussein kills more than Castro did, or at least is a similar number. And it's pretty fucking scary. Because the United States, even during this supported until the 89 or the 90s, like after the war. So it's like, this fucking shit was like, through this and other like nasty shit, they were helping this motherfucker, which is kind of fucked up. Like, what? I understand they hate for Castro. Why did they hate this motherfucker in the 80s? Because they're like, undeniably, Hussein was a motherfucker. At least in the, you know, sense that he was a bad dude. And yeah, this isn't like hidden information. This is, a lot of people talked about this shit. Even then, there was like the political dissidents of the time. You know, like what, Noam Chomsky, Atal. But that's not the only one. Let's look at Suharto. This one, I imagine most people probably don't, like, Hussein's kind of like a well-known figure. Suharto, probably not as much. But what he's responsible for probably is the Indonesian killings, 1965. It was like an anti-communist purge. What's in it? 5,000 to more than 1 million people were killed in Indonesia. And see, I think it started with like a revolutionary group trying to overthrow the previous ruler, Sukarno. Yeah, Sukarno. And then being one of the generals alive, Suharto, he kind of started up some pretty mass killing, like 500,000 to more than 1 million people. And Suharto was supported by the United States. I don't know if the people at least knew of this shit, but the government did. Overtly supported him because he was killing communists, which, you know, after the Red Scare, the U.S. government didn't like him. Or I guess this is during the Red Scare. This is 65. 65? Yeah. 65 to 66. And so it's like, well, I understand like why they would hate Castro, because, you know, killed people, but the same people, why weren't they condemning this motherfucker when he died? Because he's orders of magnitude worse. And like, even with Castro, like the reasons, like the people in Cuba specifically that really, like, you know, view Castro as being a good guy, because while it might not have been democracy, it looks like they don't really care about that as much. It was about the social standards. Because after Batista, that corrupt ass motherfucker, he kind of just brought in the gap between the very rich and the very poor, and most Cubans seem to be pissed off, I think. And then Castro kind of like improved the social standards of education, healthcare, poverty. It was just like, for the Cubans specifically, who at least liked him, who weren't dissidents, their lives were probably much, much, much better off, and that's probably part of the reason why he's, gotten during his death. A lot of people were sad because they viewed him as being, one of the good guys, despite his, murders. But the same people who really fucking hated him, I don't know if they were saying anything when this guy died. Maybe they're just trying to mainly the United States people, because that's mostly what I was seeing on Twitter and reading into. I don't know if they said anything about the Indonesian thing. They're probably trying to distance themselves from it and other regimes, aside from the ones that are still supporting to this day, like Saudi Arabia, which I don't know if I need to talk about the fucking human rights violations. What is the humans? How do they rank it though? Because I know it's like any kind of like people who try to judge human rights, or any kind of humanitarian shit. They really don't like Saudi Arabia for not hard to understand. Okay, well, one of the worst human rights records in the world. Well, since it's like Suharto, he's probably not as well talked about. Saudi Arabia is, since it's even today, it's like a major U.S. Uh, trading partner at the very least, not necessarily ally, and they're kind of notorious for being a pretty fucked up regime, and that's one that's still supported to this day. I mean, if the people who really hate Castro, even for the good reasons to hate him, murder, human rights violations, why aren't they petitioning their government to fucking cease ties with this? Probably just because of economic interests. Because it's like the reason people hate, like the official, like the real reasons that the government hated Castro in the '60s was because he was promoting ideas that were not for the U.S. interest. Kind of like Saddam Hussein, he was supported when he was allied with the U.S. basically, but then once he started going for interests aside from them, like he was no longer their boy, then he was an enemy. So it's like, it's not about whether or not they're mass murderers. It's like irrelevant. It's purely whether or not they're, mass murderers for the U.S. or not. I guess because it's like the Indonesian killings, they didn't directly benefit the U.S. because they were killing communists, which after during the Red Scare, I guess that's part of why they supported Suharto and all this nasty shit. Actually, in terms of numbers, yeah, how does that, like the Soviet purges? Yeah, pretty much everybody hates Stalin because he was responsible for more deaths than Hitler. He pretty fucking bad dude. And but Suharto, it's like supported. This dude also is a more recent person who fucking not a nice person. Actually, I think is this guy who had fucking people boiled to death? Yeah, fuck, boiled people alive. There was two prisoners. Well, he's another person. Yeah. See, he's fucking John Kerry, because it doesn't matter about like Democratic or Republican, like left or right. That's fucking not the point. It's purely a matter of, do these mass murderers, are they economically beneficial to the United States. If they are, then they support them. If they aren't, then they're like, whoa, these crimes, these are inexcusable. Otherwise, they just seem to fucking ignore them, like they did with Saddam Hussein during the 80s, or this motherfucker, Augusto Pinochet. This this guy's probably Chile, right? Yeah, Chile. Whew. Oh yeah, it's got its own human rights violation thing. There's another thing where it's like doesn't matter left or right or, but he's a bad dude. Let's see, killed. So this is a similar number of people killed as Castro, probably for different reasons, but tortured 29. 2/3 of the cases listed happened in 1973. Was that? Fuck. Oh yeah, that was the coup. Coup of 73. Anyway, yeah. This is another case of like bad fucking dudes, but the people who really hate Castro, like they claim to hate him because murdered lots of people, human rights violations, which are, very very good reasons to hate somebody, but that's not like they don't apply that to all the mass murderers. Some of them they overtly support, which I find really interesting. It's like it's only a reason to hate them if they're not benefiting you, which is pretty fucked up in terms of, genocide. Which I guess what the Indonesian massacre? It wasn't really. It was for their political beliefs, not their heritage. Is there a word for that? Killing people for a political ideology? Because it's certainly happened a lot in the 20th century. I'm not sure if there's. It's not quite genocide. There's probably a word for it, but rather than think about it, I also found this list of authoritarian regimes supported by the United States. This is a fucking long list. And in terms of the current ones, like not all authoritarian regimes are necessarily mass murdering, Stalin type who just kill millions, but they still all have pretty, understandably, inherently bad things to do with being an authoritarian regime. Saudi Arabia is probably the 1945, so after World War II. Because I think, yeah, it was the oil reserves were discovered in what, 38? Yeah, March 38. So, it just seems, it's not a case of, yeah, sure, they do bad things just like Castro, but they're on our side, so it's okay. I find that to be, if it wasn't, if it wasn't so grotesque, it'd be like you'd laugh at it for how stupid it is. Egypt. I don't know much about modern Egypt actually. Who's this dude? Hmm. Uh, with Uganda specifically, I'm pretty sure Idi Amin, who's the well-known dictator from Uganda, who's killed a lot of people, I don't think he was supported by the United States. Pretty sure he wasn't. Actually, I guess check this. Uganda. No, at least according to this, because I think that was like they didn't have any significant ties to the United States. Odds are, though, based on all these other motherfuckers, if they had a lot of oil, then yeah, the United States would have been like, yo, this Idi Amin dude, he's our boy. Like, I don't know, it's really, it's just, I find this shit really interesting. That there's so much justifiable animosity towards Castro, but they don't apply that to other people who do the same shit. It's kind of fucked up.